I'm going to use this video to address the allegations made against me.
On October 29th, 2020, Twitter user Lovebird, or Ivory Rasmus, released a series of tweets regarding Pyrocynical.
I've been accused of grooming a 15-year-old boy when I was 19. This is categorically untrue and a complete lie.
Pyro was trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl from France.
It's about that time.
Since the creation and upcoming of the commentary genre on YouTube all the way back in early 2016, many creators have stood out amongst the rest and gained respect for the type of content that they were making. Whether it be in-depth criticisms of large public figures or mocking and making fun of people just for the hell of it, we cannot deny the fact that it has helped shape the community and YouTube as a whole into what it is today. Many creators have come and gone, with some finding it too hard to fit into the current landscape, but over the past few years a certain creator has been climbing through the ranks and setting himself up to become one of the community's most respected and revered people. This creator is none other than Turkey Tom.
Can't we be sweethearts? Why don't we fall in love?
Turkey Tom is a creator who currently sits at a staggering 199,000 subscribers, but I feel as if I have to mention that this number used to be higher, but I'll get into that a bit later. Having been on the site for almost 6 years, his journey through the commentary ranks, learning by trial and error, has impacted the community for the better, showing that even monster-addicted 15-year-olds who suck at animation can make it into a semi-successful YouTuber if they're lucky enough.
Need to find a way to become psychologically, irreversibly addicted
to Monster Energy.
He's managed to accumulate a very impressive 20 million views in his time on the platform, with his most popular videos being unique topics that not too many people have talked about before he brought the situation to light. These videos vary quite significantly, but ultimately it brought fresh eyes and different audiences to his channel. Some of these videos, to name a few, are my personal favorites and what I believe to be some of the best in the community and on his channel. His videos regarding Ethan Klein of H2H3, Monkey Jones and the infamous Alex Jones are all top tier in my opinion and deserve a watch.
I'm kind of retarded.
Tom has undergone many different changes throughout his time on YouTube, such being trying multiple different jokes, character art, animation and even editing styles. Not only that, but he's also changed the topics of his videos, changing from content-focused rants on certain topics which effectively got him to where he is today, to topics that are completely different to what he's ever done before, seemingly throwing shit at the wall and seeing what would stick. Despite all these different changes and him just being a 17-year-old when he eventually blew up, he has garnered the respect of most, if not all, of the people around him in the community, collaborating and establishing online friendships with some prominent creators who have channels of all different styles and sizes, with the likes of Nicholas Diorio, Bo Blacks and even Zog being prime examples. The scripting in Tom's videos in itself is reason enough to watch it. His scripts are enticing, complex grammatically and keep the viewer interested while simultaneously getting his message across in a fast-paced and organized way. His ability to be so unique and entertaining of course didn't go unnoticed, with him growing at an exponential rate in 2017 all the way up to 2020. Tom has managed to cultivate an audience that seems to be very loyal to his channel, and it's impressive that he's managed to maintain so many people for such a long period of time. On October 29th, 2020, allegations came out against one of the most respected and largest creators in the community. This person was none other than Pyrocynical. A tweet longer was made by the Twitter user Lovebird, also known as Ivory Rasmus.
Pyrocynical groomed me, and I have screenshots to prove it. I've been sitting here thinking about this shit nonstop, being angry, confused, and sad that I've had to accept this since I was 15, but I've never said anything because I felt powerless. What he sent ranged from drawn not safe for work to fetishy YouTube videos, and he'd ask me to compile shit for him using tags that he liked on certain websites. At 15, I obviously did it because he's fucking Pyrocynical. I was just happy to be talking to him, and I was trying to continue that.
It was only a matter of time before some of the larger creators and people with more prominent voices in the community started to pick up on the situation. Several videos and tweets were made until eventually Pyrocynical himself realized that the whole thing wasn't just going to blow over. He then proceeded to respond through a Reddit post which was posted on his own subreddit. Seeing this Reddit post automatically made the sheep of the community believe every single word that was typed, some not even looking properly at the post and still making videos on it because it was such a hot topic. This wasn't until Ivory himself later responded with some rather interesting screenshots in an attempt to further disprove the innocence of Nile. These interesting screenshots would further pique the interest of nearly everyone in the community, most notably Turkey Tom. After seeing the screenshots, Tom believed he had enough evidence to make a video, attempting to piece together everything as well as shame the community for their lazy looks and takes regarding the situation. The video in question was titled Pyrocynical's Lie, setting the record straight. In this video, Tom would not only attempt to sway public perspective in the sense that everyone who believed that Niall was innocent should in fact wait for further info and evidence before making their claims. Tom sounds very confident of his words and phrases that he used. As aforementioned, he has always been good at wording and been able to write decent scripts, and this video is no different. He proceeds to make comparisons to other YouTubers and content creators who have been publicly accused of things such as grooming and even pedophilia, using the likes of James Charles, Slazzo and Pro Jared as examples. He states that while those being accused always get the brunt of the hate, the accusers as well as the defenders have received the same if not worse backlash, if the allegations and statements they came out with are proven to be false. He mentions the likes of I'm Alex, Taddy Westbrook and Heidi O'Farrell being made to look like fools for pushing a narrative that was never true. This comparison makes a lot of sense, especially after looking at the sheer amount of hate Ivory got after making the twit longer. These reasonable comparisons led Tom to defend Ivory and talk about the hate as well as the love he has received, with Ivory's allegations bringing forward even more people who claim to have been sent fetish art by the big man himself.
What matters to me is that there are multiple accounts of Pyrocynical abusing his power to be sexual with fans, which include minors. It's not just me who's been affected. This is public knowledge in multiple communities, and has been tolerated and in turn enabled for far too long. If you've been in a situation like mine, please know that you are not alone, and that there are loads of people who are willing to support you.
The twitters that were then attached to the twitlonger were a very valuable point of the allegations, honestly making or breaking them. Reason being because this would prove to us if the messages and screenshots that were shown to us were real or not. One of these videos being a super fast roll through of Discord messages between Niall and Ivory, and the other being a collection of DMs between him and Pyrocynical's current girlfriend Ida. Assuming these messages weren't tampered with, Ida seems to admit that the messages sent by the deleted user were in fact Pyro, and she continues to state that she doesn't believe what Pyro did was that bad. And though she expresses that the age gap between Pyro and Ivory wasn't exactly the greatest, she also says that she doesn't believe that Ivory could have been hurt by it. For the rest of the video, he goes on to explain his frustration with the commentary community for not doing the proper research required, calling them out on their bullshit, and it was pretty fair to say that Tom was not best pleased with fellow commentator prison mate Luke, who is well known in this community for his horrendously low effort content and often bad takes. His videos regarding the situation were nothing short of terrible, with seemingly no research being done and Luke himself seeming not interested in the topic he was talking about. For what was literally the next quarter of the video, Tom criticizes and shits on Luke while defending and stating his points in the process. These takes would have prison mate Luke shit the bed, releasing an apology for even talking about the allegations in the first place. People soon caught up to just how shit this guy really was. He has over 135,000 subscribers and just a few months ago was getting close to 1 million views, and yet now he can even barely scrape 20,000 views. A clip from a Tommy C video is then played where Ivory himself explains that the word grooming was only used because one of his friends in the Discord call told him to use it.
Did somebody tell you to use the word grooming?
I was in a call with my friend when I typed it out, and I typed I remember I typed that and asked is that okay? Because they know about this, and that was I got a yes for that, so.
Yes.
If we take a look at the Google definition of the word grooming, it would be very obvious that we can say, no, Pyro didn't groom anyone. And that much is very true. He didn't commit the act of grooming or pedophilia. However, someone who did commit the act of pedophilia was Red Kiwis. Everything Tom says in this video could immediately put to question when he suddenly compares a certain YouTuber by the name of Red Kiwis to Pyrocynical. He stated that it is shocking how similar these two YouTubers are, when in reality they could not be further apart. For all those unaware, Red Kiwis was a Fortnite YouTuber who was exposed for, and admitted to, sending pictures of his dick to underage girls. The comparison made by Tom is shocking, comparing a legitimate pedophile to Pyrocynical while trying to build a narrative and convey your opinion is beyond stupid. It breaks down everything that was said beforehand. Even more ironic is when right after this, Tom states that the community is overstepping their boundaries when it comes to these allegations. Funnily enough, he then proceeded to write a 19-page Google document, and another video addressing the main points of the document. After these comparisons and a brief spill of hypocrisy, Tom goes on to compare these allegations to that of Slazzo just a year prior. As much as I like Tom, even I must admit that going as far as to say that everyone who would compare these two allegations as flat out liars is quite bold, not to mention the sheer fact that Slazzo's girlfriend took screenshots and other messages out of context to push a narrative against the other, when it would seem like that's exactly what's happening here. More particularly when he took the messages between Ivory and Pyrocynical's girlfriend Ida at face value, when it is clear that these messages were purposefully shown by Ivory in an attempt to further prove Pyro's guilt. Even after all this, one thing was made clear by Tom: Pyrocynical is by no means a groomer or a pedophile. But you simply can't say that what he did was right. You can look at the comparisons made by him all you want, but he did make that statement clear. The second video released by Tom is only 15 minutes long, acting more like a reaction to all the points he made in his original video, as well as discussing a 19-page Google Doc which Tom had written. The video's main aim is simple: to prove Pyrocynical's guilt, as stated by the title. The video starts off straight to the point, stating that Ivory himself DM'd him after the Google Doc was released and allegedly came forward with more evidence. This alleged evidence will be none other than the leaked Discord messages between Ivory and Pyro's current girlfriend, which I mentioned earlier. Tom mentions that Ida messaged Ivory to blame him, and even goes as far as to say that the allegations, and I quote, aren't that bad. Tom goes on to attempt to prove that the messages between Ivory and Ida are indeed real, by comparing account names and Discord profiles. This is where Tom's points start to become a bit shaky, but I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. We can sit and speak for a while on how Tom brought these allegations to the table, but before that I think it's worth mentioning how Pyrocynical's own fans spread lies about the situation. A certain Steam user even went around making messages with the same username and profile pic as Ivory, and posting screenshots of these conversations on his Reddit, attempting to shift blame, which the rest of his fans and people of the subreddit believed. Turkey Tom's Twitter was being blown up after all these videos dropped, with some of the fans even making the argument that Ivory had sex with Pyro. Honestly, it's funny to see the lengths that his fans will go to in order to shift blame away from Pyro. This is the kind of autism I had to deal with over the past few weeks. At this point, a lot of the arguments literally come down to, well, Ivory had sex. It's not even going to be worth trying to reason with these liquid brains anymore. Back to the Google Doc, it was deleted a few days after it was posted, for a reason which I'll get into in just a bit. The main point made by Tom in this video was not that Pyrocynical was a groomer or pedophile, but instead of a man who was so depraved of human interaction that he would do anything to talk to people in a sexual manner, regardless of age or what they were talking about. He points out that this would be a good reason that Pyro was on these servers in the first place. The Google Doc itself was well written, as Tom's writing is usually above average. But the problem with it is that it made some bold assumptions and allegations that were so bold that ultimately sparked a response from Pyrocynical himself, who proceeded to upload a lengthy response where he would address the Google Doc as well as the videos made about him and the original tweet. The response made by Niall would seemingly kickstart all the backlash and harassment that he faced from not only Pyrocynical's fans but even his own. The response video was no early Christmas for Tom. The video was published on the 18th of December, and all of a sudden the allegations and the videos mentioning it skyrocketed in views and popularity as a whole. Pyrocynical's varying audience is something that is dangerous to mess around with, tapping into multiple different communities such as game, movie, as well as commentary. This means that there were many who had no clue about the allegations in the first place. They went from being known by a couple 100,000 to over an astonishing 4.4 million people. Or to put it into perspective, nearly the same amount as a subscriber count. As I stated, the main thing being mentioned in this video is of course the Google Doc made by Tom, with small clips from other commentary channels also being played just to show how ignorant the community can be when it comes to serious allegations like the ones we have here. In this video, Pyro speaks without hesitation, leading me to believe that he had everything firmly planned out and believes in what he is saying. While most of the things he says can be backed up and are hard to fight against, like when he showed various screenshots to prove that the age that was given to him was a lie on Ivory's part, there are some rather strange bits as well. For example, this part in the video around the 9-minute mark where Pyrocynical himself explains that Ivory linked him to his Twitter where the age in bio was 16, and even after acknowledging this he still went on with the weird furry roleplay.
When Ivory linked me his Twitter profile, the age in bio says 16. This is something I acknowledged in my Reddit post, but to be fair, I probably didn't elaborate enough on it. In retrospect, I never should have continued the furry stuff with him once I learnt of his age, even though at the time I didn't see it as a problem. Legally, age of consent is 16 in both my country and his state. I understand though that, this is going to be one of those weird grey areas where people are going to agree or disagree. I think it's a combination of all of these variables coming together which led me to believe at the time there was nothing wrong from a moral standpoint.
You, the viewer, can decide if this is right or wrong. Niall states that this is a grey area, and that is very true. Pyro then goes on to show multiple other screenshots that Tom used in his Google Doc, but the screenshots in question seem to be vague and don't convey a proper argument to the point that Tom was trying to make, that being that Pyrocynical knew the Age of Ivory all along. After thoroughly listening to some of the points made by Pyro, it becomes more and more clear that this is simply not the case. Pyro then addresses the statement made in the document where Tom tries to prove that the age was known by referencing Pyro's girlfriend, but once again, after further inspection of the screenshots, that would not be the case. For the remainder of the video, Pyro defends people on social media who were defending him when all of these allegations were taking place, as some of those people's Twitter threads were being used against them in the Google Doc. Pyrocynical also states that it was his responsibility to verify the age of the person he was having these weird conversations with, but seeing as his intentions were not to take the relationship further, which was the implication in the document, he didn't see it as a major factor. He addresses another point made in the Google Doc, saying that the only reason he messaged the other person, asking how to mass delete Discord messages, is because he was afraid that his own audience and the general public would know just how much of a degenerate he is. This does seem sketchy at first glance. Though it is understandable that you would be afraid that you may lose viewers because of this information coming out, we can't hide from the fact that it would seem odd that you want to delete this, possibly because he may have learned of the Age of Ivory at the time. As for now, it is still unknown. This wasn't made clear by Tom or Pyro in either of these videos. Merely 6 days later, Tom responded, this time not only having to change his own fans' opinions, but having to combat against one of the biggest and most well-known creators in this community. On the 23rd of December last year, Turkey Tom uploaded a video titled Responding to Pyrocynical, where he would make an attempt to calm down the mob of not only Pyrocynical's fans but as well as his own who turned against him. Tom was anticipating this response, as he points out in the video, but I don't think even he was expecting to get as much heat as he did. At this moment in time, the response video has over 87,000 dislikes compared to a measly 10k likes, not to mention over 30,000 comments stating their disgust for Tom. Not a pretty sight to see for those who actually liked him as a creator. Straight off the bat, Tom gets to the problems he had in the response that Pyro made, firstly being framing a misrepresentation of Tom. He states that he found it rather odd that Pyrocynical starts the video off talking about how he was framed as a predator and a groomer, and then proceeds to make the majority of his response about the Google Doc which Tom made, almost as if it was meant to look like it was Tom who was accusing him of either of these things.
My first issue with Pyro's response comes down to framing and misrepresentation, which he ironically accuses me of in the video. He opens it up by talking about the accusations of grooming and being some sort of predator, and then makes the rest of the video about my document and videos made about my document, as if I was accusing him of either of these things.
Recently, to those who are unaware, I've been accused of grooming a 15-year-old boy when I was 19, that I'm some kind of predator and was aware of his age all along. This is categorically untrue and a complete lie. The supposed proof for these insane allegations is paper thin and embarrassingly wrong.
Tom has stated many times that Pyrocynical cannot be labeled as a groomer nor a pedophile, as that would simply not add up to the situation or even the definitions of the words. Whether this was the intent or not, you cannot deny that it seems odd considering Pyro knew the larger majority of his audience may not have heard of these allegations before, even less so with the Google Doc and Tom's multiple videos. Tom then proceeds to add meaning to the words used by Pyro, stating that Pyro said the allegations were insane, which could mean, and I quote, which means that it's so ridiculous to the point where any of it could be true. Tom states that this could be Pyro's attempt at shifting the goalpost, a misrepresentation of what was originally said in the two videos. Taking it at face value, this does seem like a solid argument. It's almost as if it was framed to put words in Tom's mouth which he never said. In Pyro's response, he says that the document is cowardly, not even definitively stating if he's a groomer or not, which is then countered by Tom in his response, where he states that a line in the Google Doc, which was criticized by Pyrocynical, was purposefully placed there to be able to put up for the reader to decide.
By responding to my points in tandem with points that I never even made, and not even clarifying who made the argument, he makes it seem as if these are all from me, but they're just not. In my original video, I flat out said that there was no evidence of of grooming and that he's not a pedophile. She even pointed to his age being younger than 15 and said that while the age gap was bad, she doesn't think that it constitutes grooming. And I agree completely. It may not constitute grooming. And in the follow-up document I released about it, I made the claim that I didn't really know either way, leaving it up for the readers to decide. Is Pyrocynical a groomer? While I first stated no, after these new leaks, I don't feel comfortable saying no. That being said, Ivory's basic message can be legitimately proven to be true. When he was 19 years old, Pyrocynical messaged a 15-year-old sexually. Pyro frames this as a disingenuous move on my part.
This document is cowardly. I mean, like, the ending is no exception. Like, they don't even definitively state if I groomed anyone. They just leave enough room for people to draw that conclusion themselves without openly saying.
But in reality, this was me doing my best to put all of the information on the table and allow some room for interpretation for what people think.
The statement was intentionally placed, seemingly not to persuade the reader, as Tom explains, but to allow the reader to think for themselves and almost mold their own meaning of the word and depiction of the topic as a whole. Whether Tom made this up in an attempt to save his ass is up for debate, but from my ever so humble opinion, it does seem like this is the reality. Pyrocynical has always been very good at driving narrative and mixing fact with opinion, but then again, so has Turkey Tom. Because of this, everything the two of them say in these response videos have to be taken with a pinch of salt. We simply have to remember that these two were up against the wall when it comes to the allegations. Pyro because of Tom's videos in the Google Doc, and Tom because of Pyro's video. In Pyro's video he brings up irony, and how he felt it was ironic for the document to state that people should watch the video in full before passing judgment. The fact that it took up until page 16 of 19 for Tom to clarify this was in no way a hidden detail, which Tom explains.
There's this one part of the doc that claims that people make the mistake of not watching an entire video before they pass judgment. And this is like bitterly ironic. You make that claim, but you leave so much out of my original statement. It's written with like such cruel intentions, and it waits until page 16 out of 19, only then to confirm that I never actually sent or received nudes.
While this is the case, this wasn't a malicious move, and this isn't really a point I even had to acknowledge because the original accusations had nothing to do with sending naked pictures of himself to anyone. He claims that I hid this detail in the middle of a paragraph, but it's right there. I can't hide the words, you just have to read it.
This argument simply had no place. Since the Google Doc withholds so much information, Tom probably expected the people to at least make an attempt to read it all the way through. Tom stating his opinions in longer form should not be something that should be used against him like Pyro did. It is simply not necessary. So far through Tom's response we have seen that he has easily pushed aside the weaker points made by Pyro, yet throughout the middle of the video as well as later on I feel as if Tom's arguments grow stale. As we all know by now, Pyro interacted in Ivory in sexual Discord roleplay. While this might be disgusting to us everyday people, Pyro stated many times that I read the response that there was no intention to physically interact with Ivory, even less so in a sexual manner. I bring this up because Tom straight up says it without hesitation. Roleplay, even though it does imitate real world actions, does not make it real. I believe the fact that this was on a furry Discord sex server makes that statement even more true. Pyro claimed to know that the age of Ivory was in fact 16. He knew because it was the age in his bio at the time. The problem with this is that Ivory lied about his age, actually being either 14 or 15 when it happened. Even though we can all agree he should have clarified that Ivory's age was in fact legal, we cannot blame him for thinking otherwise because of the doings of the victim. Tom tries to convince us that Pyrocynical knew the supposed age of Ivory and still actively continued to message him in a sexual manner, but the screenshots that were provided to us in the document do not line up with others. Pyro did however explain that he should have stopped interacting with him after he learned of the age gap, as I stated in the previous part. This in my opinion would be better to have focused on. Pyro already explained that he did not know the actual age of the person he was interacting with and told us that he had no actual interest in the person on the other end of the screen. I believe this means that the age gap between these two would be a larger concern. Whether Pyro was lying about knowing the age, we simply cannot ignore the fact that he did not message this person in an attempt to build a relationship. These messages and that server seemed as if it was simply to be horny and to move on. Tom took these statements and blew them out of the water by trying to cover it as a man who was purposefully looking to sexually interact with a 15-year-old daily, which I simply cannot believe. At the 5-minute mark we are introduced to the second part, labeled Pyrocynical's Tactics, where Tom continues to attempt to convince the viewer that Pyro knew the age of Ivory all along. He claims that the fact that Ivory was very vocal about his age not only on Twitter but as well with people they both knew. He thought this was evidence enough that Pyro must have known. These statements are combated by the fact that in Pyro's response he says that he was suspended from Twitter, meaning that the chance of him seeing these these tweets are insanely lower. Not to mention that it is bold to assume that Pyro talked about Ivory with a mutual person they knew. I believe that the chances that they would end up in a conversation talking about the age of the person whom he had no interest in are insanely low. Not to mention the fact that there was no evidence that Pyro and the mutual actually talked about Ivory, making this point useless. As I mentioned earlier, Pyro responds to a controversial point in the Google Doc where Tom stated that Pyro was planning to fly out the victim in order to sexually interact with him. Pyro defended himself by saying this is a spun narrative. He stated that the messages were only used to roleplay multiple times, meaning that there should have been no intent.
It's a blanket statement of Pyrocynical groomed me. The only thing I can possibly think of is inviting him and a bunch of other people to an event in the UK. And somehow this got spun as me buying him a plane ticket to fly him out to have sex with.
Tom responds to this point by stating that he is a furry. Even his girlfriend draws things like this regularly and has been doing so for years.
The idea of Pyro being a furry freak has been a joke in the community for a while. He even held his own phone up to his camera to show his fat thing in the background. His own girlfriend, who he is public about dating, draws this shit regularly and has been doing so for years. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together, man. This doesn't really add up.
Then he brings up the messages where Ivory initiated a conversation between the two, asking if they could meet up sometime.
Ivory asks Pyro when he can visit him on May 6, 2017. The last reference in text to sexual roleplay prior to this was April 29. Pyro claims that he invited Ivory to the event indiscriminately, but reading the messages we can see that this isn't possible because Ivory initiated the conversation. It would contextually make no sense. The actual messages indicate they were looking for any chance to meet up, and the event simply happened to be a convenient time to do it. I can already hear people blaming Ivory for initiating this conversation, but again, Pyro was the adult here, and because all of Pyro's messages were deleted, we're only able to speculate as to why it was broken.
Interestingly enough, the dates and the deleted user add up. This is very, very interesting. Sive Morton, more popularly known as PewDiePie's editor and Pyro's friend, was brought in by Pyro to defend these statements. The fact that Niall invited a bunch of people he didn't know that well does not make Tom's statement after seeing this video any better. Despite the fact that the things he mentioned might be true, this is not to say that something was planned or something went down. As strange as it may be, the fact that Pyro talked to this person in a sexual manner, to the point where they discussed kinks and fetishes, quite simply does not mean that they were supposed to have sex. You even said that there doesn't seem to be anything planned, and then said it's not off the table, meaning that Tom not only is too stubborn to take a look into the points made by Sive, but also too stubborn to understand that this point is not concrete in any sense of the word.
I do remember back in 2017, Niall invited me and a bunch of other people to drink with him, and I remember telling Niall very last minute that I couldn't come, so I pretty much flaked on him. To say something sexual was going to happen in a very public event with a load of people, even people Niall didn't even know and wasn't really close with, it's just false. Seriously.
This is all irrelevant. Do you think Ivory would have just flown home after a night of underage drinking? And do you think that nothing sexual happens after public events? Even though it's framed as a refute, nothing Sive said changes anything.
Some questionable DMs are then shown where furry characters is drawn and Pyro responds by saying not thick enough. Just a warning that the image you are about to see is quite disturbing.
If this isn't not safe for work, I don't know what is.
Pyro makes it a point in his video and say him saying not thick enough was simply a joke taken out of context. But what Tom brings up, and myself believe, is that why would you want that to be sent to you in the first place? The sender sending this to him must be in question as well. Looking at other messages, we can see that even in the roleplay, Pyro responds by saying not thick enough to some of the furry art when sent on Discord, meaning that it is very possible that these could just be made up lies to defend this. Earlier I mentioned how Tom compared the situation to red kiwis and gained a lot of heat for it, and rightfully so. I am however glad to admit that he has admitted for his wrong. This was good to see considering how stubborn he was in defending other points made in his document. A decent amount of the document was based around the fact that Pyro knew the age of Ivory, which ultimately backfired and became weaker when Pyrocynical stated that he was suspended from Twitter at the time of the messages. Even after this, when Ivory turned 16, Pyro admitted that he knew of the age, as Tom explains here.
At the time that the original screenshots were released, Pyrocynical never explicitly stated in his Reddit response that he kept talking to Ivory, simply that he didn't have his age in his bio until he had turned 16. This is because he felt he didn't have to, so his fans gave him the benefit of the doubt and assumed that he had stopped talking to him. But once more evidence came out in my videos, he had to admit it. There was no tiptoeing around it. And my document itself is a small portion of this greater picture.
Tom then proceeds to uncover the so-called Keemstar files, which notoriously started when Keemstar accused Pyro of allegedly speaking with a 15, 14 or even 13-year-old French girl.
Pyro was trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl from France. alright? That he was technically like a pedo or a weirdo or something.
You may be able to recall that Pyro debunked these allegations. On June 11th, just a few days after the response made by Pyrocynical in 2016, Keem released these screenshots with the girl in question. The screenshots themselves are peculiar, with Pyro stating that he was happy to meet up with her as well as willing to wait until she was of legal age. Similarly to these allegations, Pyro responded in a Reddit post where he stated that they were merely friends with no real connotation of the relationship being in place. Meaning, he says that they didn't have a relationship but was very happy to wait for her to turn 16 so they could have one. If you want to go and look further into the French girl allegations, I recommend you do so, with the infamous interview being released recently. Pyrocynical twisted this, yes, but why did Tom bring this up? Well, he states that it is because just how much these allegations are similar to the ones we have at hand. Ultimately, Tom is trying to use these old allegations and manipulative wording by Pyro to defend his current points. He is enacting in the horrid act of digging up old allegations which add no fuel to our current fire. It is simply not needed. Turkey Tom was a fan of Pyrocynical. He states this many times. He went into this fully on Pyro's side and came out the other end as the opposite. He firmly believes what Ivory says apart from a few minor exaggerations. This was not an act of grooming. Tom debunked this multiple times as well, defending Pyro against anyone who would use this word or get information wrong. Tom was right in some regard. His fans and fans in general should never believe everything someone has to say, and by doing so they even gloss over the things Pyro himself blatantly admits to in his response. Pyro was being irresponsible with his platform and Tom rightfully called him out for it. He did that with good in his mind, but ultimately he took it too far and ended up paying the price for it, losing about 18,000 subscribers and getting dislike bombed as far as some of his first videos. Now even he was being labeled as a clout chasing liar, even by the community he is a part of. For these reasons, Tom knew he had to leave. What followed was a period of recovery and work, stacking up videos for the future, hoping it would make up for the 3 months or so that he had disappeared off of the internet. Tweets were deleted, he was inactive on all accounts, and all of a sudden one of the community's best creators has gone rogue. This opened the door for acts of backstabbing, seeing the opportunity to take advantage of a trending topic, knowing that he couldn't do anything about it. One of the very last points Tom makes in his response is that the community that we are a part of is filled with spineless idiots who flip-flop opinions at any sway of what the general public believes. And quite honestly, he could not be more right. This is a community built on feeding and growing off of drama and controversies which they ultimately use to fuel their egos by simply looking at their social blades. However, I can't really say that this is a bad thing. There are many enjoyable creators who do this and do it right. It's all about views and money at the end of the day, and I get that. After Pyro rightfully called out a few creators who were spreading lies and misinformation about the allegations, their spines snapped and they all privated their videos, with some even making apologies for their doings. Pyrocynical, being the bigger creator, had a larger number on his side. This would explain the sheer amount of dislikes left on Tom's videos. What I like to call the vultures of the community quickly took aim to their next target after realizing just how many people they could get on their side. One of these creators in particular almost grew his entire channel off of the back of Tom's cancellation. This creator is none other than Bonza. I mainly mention him just because of the sheer stupidity in the statements that he makes in these videos, not mentioning anything even remotely bad about the allegations which led to this and just going straight for the neck of Tom. 3 videos all aimed at Tom sit over 20,000 views and have half decent like to dislike ratios, fueling to the statements I made earlier about people simply just wanting to hate on Tom knowing that they would be backed. As much as you want people to know that you have a minor in psychology, it simply does not matter. Nothing you say in each of these 3 videos contains any relevant criticism or points that matter. All that got him to where he is now was his ability to feed off of drama and majority public opinion, too scared to even put his tip in the dark side of having a differing one. You even try to call out Nicholas the Oreo for even mentioning your name, calling him a lackey despite him achieving more than you could ever wish to do, in what was probably his dumbest video out of them all. He's not the only one either, with countless other creators taking him as a trending topic and releasing large videos sort of exposing him. Some of these videos even try to mock Turkey Tom's series while he calls out other creators by giving them criticism which they never seem to be able to handle. Pokemon, Storytime animators and others are among the most popular on his channel. They saw this as an opportunity to lay some irony into the saga by giving it the same title. Whereas Tom would go to lengths to add valid points and criticize those in question, these guys would just hop onto Pyrocynical's fat dragon cock. As much as I tried to watch some of these videos all the way through, I simply couldn't do it without wanting to, well, you know. Oh, yeah! Some of these videos were pretty good, establishing good points as well as criticizing relevant points and mistakes made by Tom without listening to what the mob has to say. I thought this video uploaded by Dillin Thomas had good potential until about 1 minute into the 25 where he says that Tom enjoys calling people pedophiles. Yes, he actually said this.
That is, him randomly calling people pedophiles. Because in case you didn't know this, calling people pedophiles randomly is not a good thing. Now you can claim that it is humorous to call people pedophiles, but I would argue that calling someone a pedophile, unlike calling them literally anything else, so I would refrain from calling someone a pedophile unless you 100% know they are guilty.
It's shocking. It really is. Even in between these, there were a select amount who went to the extent of defending Turkey Tom and the matter at hand. And honestly, these were good videos. Alfie's video is probably the pick of the bunch from what I could find. His video defending Tom actually contained some valid criticism and stating Tom's mistakes in the process, as well as stating how he doesn't feel he deserves to be cancelled. It may not have been the best video in the world, but he had the balls to say what seemingly nobody else has said, and I give him massive props for that. And even this was called out by Bonza. He is like a moth to the flame of Turkey Tom's name. It's truly pathetic. On the 5th of March of this year, after over 3 months off of the internet, Turkey Tom made his return to a huge ovation, uploading daily videos that he had been making throughout his break for almost 10 days, breathing life back into his channel. His first video, giving in to cancel culture, got a staggering 137,000 views on return, which is phenomenal considering he hadn't been uploading for so long, with some people still disliking it due to his drama a few months back. Tom also returned to Twitter after deleting all of his tweets. From here on, it would seem like Tom had been forgiven. All 10 of these videos released by Tom had hit over 100,000 views, which is phenomenal for a channel that had gone stagnant. Videos made on iDubbbz, John Swan, and most notably Futuristic Hub would add to the list of Turkey Tom videos you wouldn't want to miss. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Turkey Tom had found salvation. His fans wanted him back. Even the ones who unsubscribed because of the drama had resubscribed, meaning that he's almost at the point where he was last year, potentially even going over that. Turkey Tom made mistakes that I was hopefully able to point out in this video, but ultimately even his own cancellation and hate that he had received on all social medias was not enough to keep him down. He may have been a fallen hero for the community, but oh boy did he come back swinging, almost as if nothing ever happened. My final verdict on these allegations have been made clear. Pyrocynical is not a groomer nor a pedophile, just a bit of a freak. But even then you cannot deny every single point Tom makes or say that he's innocent for his doings. Blatant admitting of the things that were done were simply glossed over by the majority of the YouTube landscape. Though he may have overstepped his boundaries and paid the price for it, there's no denying everything Tom said throughout his trilogy of videos. Ivory is not innocent either. Lying about age and joining not safe for work servers at age 15 cannot be blamed upon anybody else except for him. Even after all this, it would seem like we have a happy ending. One of the most beloved creators in the community is back to doing what he does best. And on the other side of the spectrum, one of the community's most talented and promising creators has regained the love they seem to have lost. And as for Bonza and Prismate Luke, well, they've fallen even deeper into obscurity than they have been before. Whether this is good or bad is not for me to decide. I'm just here to pick up on what everyone has left. It's been 6 months, enough time to forget that any of these things ever happened, enough time to forget that Turkey Tom was chased off of the internet, with the corpse of his channel being fed on by those who crave nothing more than views. Though he may be back and performing better than ever, I doubt even his fans would forget. I've been Dr. Dream, and until next time, go fuck yourself.